What if, in the future, AI agents could independently buy and sell services without anyone being able to see their data, strategies, payments, or anything like that? This is exactly the problem that a project called MindNetwork is currently working on. With technologies like Fully Homomorphic Encryption, its own AI blockchain, and a dedicated payment layer for autonomous AI agents. The goal, a completely encrypted internet for Web 3 and artificial intelligence. But the crucial question remains now. Is this really a new infrastructure for the internet or just another crypto narrative? Hi, I'm Marius from 10x Invest, and today we're going to take a look at MindNetwork. So grab a relaxing coffee, leave a like for me, and then let's go. By the way, if you want to see which low-cap altcoins and penny stocks I can analyze, which ones I'm currently watching and have on my watch list, then take a closer look at the 10x Elite. You can find all the information down below in the video description. Alright, so let's jump straight into the video and take a technical look at MindNetwork. And what has actually happened recently is this. But first, as mentioned, MindNetwork positions itself as infrastructure for the internet where data never needs to be decrypted, not even when it is being processed. That's already a game changer. The foundation for this is a technology called Fully Homomorphic Encryption. With this, computations can be performed directly on encrypted data. This means, for example, AI agents could interact with each other, companies could analyze sensitive data, or ultimately, financial transactions could also be processed. All of this happens without the actual information ever becoming visible. And to achieve this, MindNetwork is essentially building several infrastructure layers at the same time. So for example, their own blockchain called MindChain, an encrypted data layer, and even ultimately their own payment system for autonomous AI agents. But this is exactly where things get extremely interesting, because right now many projects are making big promises, especially in the altcoin space. Everyone wants to build the infrastructure for artificial intelligence and Web 3, but only very few are actually developing a new cryptography technology. And that's why we're going to take a look now, step by step, at what really sets MindNetwork apart and what they are actually building from a technical perspective. If you take a closer look at MindNetwork, you actually notice one thing pretty quickly. The project is not just trying to ultimately create a new coin, but they are really working on building a complete infrastructure for privacy, for artificial intelligence, and for Web 3. That's why we're now going to look at the most important technical building blocks and, of course, the latest updates, step by step. Because only when you truly understand how the architecture is structured can you even begin to assess whether the whole thing really has potential. Fully Homomorphic Encryption, the foundation of the project. The most important building block behind the MindNetwork is this technology. And by the way, it's abbreviated as FHE. Many cryptographers even refer to this technology as one of the holy grails of encryption. The reason for this is actually quite simple. Normally, data always has to be decrypted before you can process or analyze it. And it's precisely at this moment that a security risk arises, because as soon as the data is available in plain text, it can theoretically be intercepted or even misused. But Fully Homomorphic Encryption aims to solve exactly this problem. Because with it, calculations can ultimately be performed directly on encrypted data. So the data is basically never decrypted. Even when it is being processed, it remains protected. And of course, this opens up completely new possibilities. New possibilities? For example, companies could analyze sensitive data without having to disclose it. Or AI systems could ultimately use training data without having access to the actual content. And it's precisely this idea that forms the foundation of the entire infrastructure of the MindNetwork. But of course, an encryption technology alone is not enough. That's why the project is currently building several infrastructure layers, and one of them is particularly exciting: the MindChain, a blockchain for AI agents. An important part of the ecosystem is the so-called MindChain. In essence, this is its own blockchain, but it was developed specifically for handling encrypted data and, above all, AI agents. And the main difference compared to, for example, traditional blockchains lies primarily in the way data is processed. In many existing networks, smart contracts are completely transparent. But of course, this also means that anyone can see which data is being used. However, the MindChain is trying to change this model. Here, smart contracts can essentially work directly with encrypted data. This naturally opens up some interesting use cases. Let's look at a few examples. For example, privacy DeFi applications. So confidential voting, but of course also, or naturally data processing for AI systems. So extremely exciting. And the goal is to have a blockchain where sensitive information can be processed without it being visible, meaning publicly visible. And this exact architecture is also being used for another topic that is becoming increasingly important, namely the payment sector. Layer for AI agents. One of the latest updates from my network is the X402Z project. This is a new payment layer for AI agents. And the idea behind it is quite exciting because in the future, autonomous AI agents could independently purchase services, but of course also sell them. Let's look at a small example here as well. For example, computing power, data, but ultimately also digital services, of course. However, the problem with this is the following. Many of these transactions contain sensitive information. For example, we have strategies, prices, or even business models. And this is exactly where the latest update comes in. The payment layer uses FHE-based encryption, enabling transactions to be verified without the contents being publicly visible. The whole thing is currently still running on the testnet. The goal is to create a structure in which AI agents can trade securely with each other. But now, AI agents are part of the complete vision. An important area is also the transfer of assets between different blockchains. FHE Bridge, encrypted cross-chain transfers. Another technical update is the so-called FHE Bridge. In doing so, MindNetwork ultimately combines its encryption technology with Chainlink's cross-chain mobility. In short, the protocol is called CCIP, and the goal here is also relatively clear. Cross-chain transfers should continue to work, but the sensitive information within the transfers remains protected. An example of this is USDC transfers between different blockchains. Normally, the details of such transactions are publicly visible. However, with the FAE bridge, certain data can also be encrypted, meaning transmitted in encrypted form, while the actual transactions continue to be correctly verified. This is particularly interesting, of course, for institutional users because many companies want to use blockchain technologies but at the same time protect their financial data. And this is exactly where MindNetwork comes in and tries to build a new infrastructure. But in addition to payments and transfers, another area also plays an important role. MindLake data infrastructure for artificial intelligence. Another component of the system is MindLake. This is essentially a kind of encrypted data lake. It is intended to store large datasets, for example AI training data or company data, or of course ultimately research data as well. And what makes it special is that the data is not simply stored openly, but instead is ultimately protected with FHE. This allows different parties to work together, of course, with the data without gaining access to the actual contents. And this could play an important role, especially for AI training and data analysis in the future, because many companies ultimately possess valuable datasets but cannot share them for data protection reasons. MindLake is trying to solve exactly this problem. But of course, technology alone is not enough. That's why MindNetwork is also actively expanding its ecosystem. And this is exactly where things get interesting as well. Partnerships and ecosystem. MindNetwork is now working together with several larger partners from the Web3 sector as well as from the technology sector. Among them, as already mentioned, is the Chainlink ecosystem. In the end, the project uses the Chainlink ecosystem, essentially the infrastructure for cross-chain communication. There are also collaborations with MindChain, for example, a blockchain network of the Ant Group. And here it's mainly about secure and confidential asset transfers, so that's also extremely exciting. Additionally, MindNetwork is also working with BytePlus, a technology platform from ByteDance. And here the focus is on secure AI services. This shows that MindNetwork is trying to position itself at the intersection of artificial intelligence, privacy, and blockchain infrastructure. But this is exactly where an important question arises, especially for investors. Can this technology really work in practice? Or will fully homomorphic encryption ultimately remain too complex and too slow for real-world application? But now let's take another look at the MindNetwork chart and see, well, what does the chart actually look like now? When is a sensible entry point? You'll get all the information now. And by the way, if you want to buy such altcoins or other altcoins, especially on a regulated exchange, I personally use Swissborg. You'll find the link below in the pinned comment. You also get a bonus when you sign up. So, a warm welcome to the chart analysis of MindNetwork. First, as always, let's go through the different price scenarios. The bear scenario, as you can see here, 0.005. Let's take a look at what that would mean. So from now, that would be about another minus 71%. That's already extreme. As I said, these are mathematically based price scenarios. In my view, no one can really predict prices. You can only look mathematically at what is theoretically possible based on the market cap. This is definitely the bear scenario developed mathematically. Then let's keep going. What does the normal scenario look like? That's 0.25. As you can see here at the very top was the all-time high, so not that far away from it. If we look at it from now, that would be a 12x, so that's already an extreme growth. So what does the bull scenario look like? There it goes significantly higher, because of course the market cap of my network is extremely low. Let's go back to roughly the current point in time. So that's roughly, let's call it there. That would already be a 70 times, which is really extreme, so there's definitely a lot of potential there. Then of course we'll keep looking further. Alright, let's do it like this, then it's a bit clearer. And ultimately go way up to the top. Bull scenario and Vision 2030, where is that? As you can see, all the way at the top, $3.50 is Vision 2030. If you think about how high that is, it's extreme. That would really be the case in the end. If in the next bull run the altcoin season comes back and a massive amount of money really flows into altcoins, especially into FHE. Now, of course, you're asking yourself, how do I come up with such values? So let's say extremely high assumptions. And as I said, it's mathematically calculated based on the market cap, what would theoretically be possible. If, for example, you already have a coin like XRP with a market cap in the billions, then the upside is, of course, absolutely limited. But with FHE, at the moment it's at about 7 to 8 million market cap, which means at $3.50, that would be a market cap of about 3.5 billion. So in other words, 3.5 billion for an altcoin in the crypto structure space isn't that unusual, so it would theoretically be mathematically possible. That's why you can see from this that you always have to pay attention to the mathematical scenarios, not just the price. The price is irrelevant. The market cap is what's important, or even better, ultimately the fully diluted market cap. And those are definitely the scenarios that are mathematically possible. Now, of course, the question is, what does the situation look like at the moment? Let's take a look at the current situation. For example, when would I enter my network, or when would I see opportunities? So, recently, let's take a look at this, we had a small green dot form here. That was roughly here. That indicated a bullish trend reversal. We then moved upwards as that formed. Yes, we went up by about 20%, but now we're more in a range again where a small red dot might form, and we could get sold off again. As I said, I was also cautious with FHF at the moment because we're kind of in the middle range here. For example, I always enter Bitcoin when a large green dot forms on the one-day chart, because then, based on the data, it could potentially be a low. So for now, I would generally just wait when it comes to Bitcoin. I assume that Bitcoin will go down a bit further. And then, if a large green dot forms on Bitcoin, I would take a look at FHF. And if, down here as well, a large green dot eventually forms, then I would consider whether to enter FH or, for example, to do DCA, if you want to use the indicator yourself, because in the end you need the indicator to see whether a large green dot is forming. On the one hand, you get it in the 10 times elite, which is my complete program, or you can also just get it separately. And all the information about it is now displayed here. Either just scan the QR code with your phone or check the video description below. Those are all the further details. Before you go, I have another exciting altcoin here that I just recently analyzed. It has extremely interesting features. Feel free to check it out. All the information. Thanks for watching and see you in a moment.